role of antioxidants in cancer treatment. He's the current president of A-Mark Enterprise, and he has a really personal experience with learning how to recover from cancer. People very close to him in his family have died from cancer, and this set him on a quest to find cures to cancer and other health challenges. He's a speaker worldwide, and he teaches about how to recover from degenerative diseases and how to really just have a better quality of life. We are so excited to have Al Sanchez here. And so everybody give a round of applause for Al Sanchez.
Thank you. This is a lot of information. So I'm going to touch on it a little bit at a time. These are some of the things I'm going to hopefully be able to walk away from with this. As you know, everybody will get a little piece of something as you listen to me talk, and my hope is that you can really come across and walk away with something that can be applicable to your situation, just whether you have cancer or not. Cancer, as we'll talk about in a little bit, is an interesting disease. It is actually a little simpler than it is more complicated, in my opinion. And we'll talk about that shortly. So, real quickly, if you'd all do me a big favor, I want everybody to stand up. Stand up, and I want to take 3 deep breaths in while you read. All right, 3 deep breaths. All right, we just created a bunch of oxidative stress in our body, believe it or not. Why? Because we breathe oxygen. This really hit me a long time ago when I read it, and it helped me to understand what we're trying to approach. Because it's a marriage of these things. Something that mankind thinks that we're going to be able to fix some disease on this planet by simply engineering some drug or some chemical isn't the way. We've had 40 years of that, and that isn't working very well. What is working is something that is what we call integrative therapies, and in those therapies we're finding out that not only are we getting better quality of life, but we're also getting better outcomes. And that's ultimately the whole goal of what I'm trying to support and participate in. So before we get into too many more things, what is an oxidant? We hear about antioxidants all the time. Right? Take this, have blueberries, have that. Be sure to eat lots of colorful fruit. What does that exactly mean? And why do we want to do that? Because technically, yes, oxidants can be bad. They can cause damage, they can cause cell damage, all kinds of things. But again, like the previous slide said, balance, balance, balance. We actually need some oxidants, some oxidation in our body to operate and do a lot of the things that our cells do. It's the way our cells communicate. But oxidation out of control creates damage to our cells, creates damage to our DNA, so therefore we need to balance those out with antioxidants. The wonderful thing about it, though, is that we don't have to engineer that. Our bodies already know how to do that, right? The food that's on the planet, the things that we eat, our bodies are pre-regulated that. And it's interesting enough that all our bodies are a little bit different. However, nonetheless, in certain situations, by increasing the dose of one or decreasing the dose of another, we can get a therapeutic effect. But in the end, it's our bodies that will do it, and it does it naturally. But what's interesting to know and to walk away from is what I highlighted on the bottom, and it talks about the mitochondria. And it talks about excessive free radicals. And yes, those do damage. So there are some really reactive oxygen species that are very damaging. As a matter of fact, a lot of the chemotherapies that are used, and radiotherapies for that matter, are used to create free radicals to go kill a cancer cell. Well, what do you think those things are doing to your healthy cells? Right?
They're doing the same thing.
They're doing the same thing, if not worse. So is there a balance? So yes, we know chemotherapies and radiotherapies work. However, we also know they have very, very bad and dangerous side effects. Can we mitigate those side effects? Can we find a better balance to maybe sometimes use them or use them more safely? And it's interesting because in my aunt's case, who just got diagnosed, I went to the oncologist. I said, "Okay, can you do low-dose chemotherapy?" He went, "Huh? Excuse me? What do you mean low-dose?" I said, "Fractionated chemotherapy. Instead of giving her once every 3 weeks, why don't we give her lower doses once a week?" I don't know about that. Okay, well here's some papers. I don't want people to know that, you know. So it was an interesting dialogue to have with him, and he was open to it, which was great to see. He didn't just kick me out of his office. He was like, "Okay," and he actually called me back on Wednesday and said that he would. Okay, great. So we just made some headway, which is wonderful. You know, this oxygen that's inside our cells, gives us life, but it also creates situations in which we have to be able to protect them. So, my main concern is what I highlighted up there is the mitochondria. So what we're finding out, and what research is showing, is that a lot of diseases, not just cancer, are mitochondrial dysfunction. And what that means is that without our bodies producing the proper energy, your cells can't go and do the things they need to do. So as I see everyone out there with their laptops or cell phones and tablets, what happens when those run out of juice? Right? What happens when we run out of juice? Exactly. But what's interesting enough is that our DNA is our DNA. It's the expression of our DNA that actually becomes the issue. We can't change our DNA. What we can do is we definitely can't affect it. This is where oxidative therapies, antioxidants really come in to play a role into what they can and cannot do. But what I've learned over the years is that there is a balance to it, and there is an approach, and certain approaches are much more effective. I'm sure a lot of you out there have taken supplements. I mean, think about all the things that we've heard. How many supplements would we have to take in one day just to accomplish all the benefits that we hear about? It's almost unrealistic. So at least we've come back to a real understanding that, we use our food primarily, and we'll talk about that shortly, because that's where the most impact is going to happen. And then we can augment that with other type therapies very specifically, depending upon the person and depending on their case. Because not every cancer is the same. Not even every breast cancer, let alone when you say cancer, what is it exactly that you mean? Because inside breast cancer alone, there's, I forget the total number, but 20 or 30 dynamo. So when we say cancer, it's really a broad term. Cancer in what stage? Cancer in what person? Cancer in what age? Very different. So what is an antioxidant? Well, it's something that's obviously going to quench that free radical. But lo and behold, there's over 4,000 antioxidants. So when we talk about this, let's talk about antioxidants. We typically think of some of the more known ones of A, C, E, these types of things. But guess what? In our foods, the flavonoids, the isocanates, the sulfides, my goodness, they are all around us. So we got to be really careful when we're talking antioxidants in chemotherapy or in cancer therapy, or just simply I want to go take some antioxidants, and this product has A, B, C, or D. Okay, that's good. Is it necessary? I don't know necessarily. Where are you at in your situation? How can we better determine what would be good in your situation versus someone else's? And what's interesting enough is the fact that, if you read the one on the bottom, that one really hits home for me, is that, the defense, it's extensive. So depending on whose figure you take, imagine that your body has 50 trillion cells in it. And out of those 50 trillion cells, right now, everything's going on. Those are just trillions of complexes and situations, and this cell's doing that, and that cell's doing this, and this one's going here, and that one's going. How could you possibly know which one's exactly what you need and you don't need? I don't, but our bodies do. And that typically comes from our food. It was nice to see finally, it's 2009 that this came out, but the evidence. So we talk about evidence-based medicine. And maybe you've heard that term or not. I hear it all the time because of the different doctors' conferences I go to. Show me the evidence. Okay? Well, we're developing that. We're in the process of that. So when we find people that are surviving and thriving from cancer, dietary habits. You may have heard some of the other talks earlier today when we were talking about when you go into an oncology one, what do you typically see?
Sugar.
Exactly. Right? So that's a whole different topic in itself. Yet they don't understand that some of the things that they can recommend and do for these cancer patients are significant and powerful. Staggering statistically, look at this, from 1950 to 2010, you can see heart disease. Look at that drop. We really home run in that. Cerebrovascular disease, huge. What was interesting though on this one is look at pneumonia and influenza. Almost nothing. It's actually risen. But yet cancer, for the past 60 years, has hardly changed. So you want to talk about evidence? There's the evidence. And this is directly from the CDC. So they know it, but they're kind of stumped on what to do. They don't know what else to do. And by the rules and regulations that they have, what do they can prescribe you? Surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. That's all the oncologists can do without getting themselves in trouble. So they're really in a little bit of a tough pickle. So how can we help them to understand or possibly re-educate them? I came across this slide some time ago, and it really hit home because Cancer dies too little. That's its problem, right? It's not. And in the cell division, without getting into too much meiosis and mitosis, in a certain way, like I mentioned earlier, it is kind of simple. These are some, Dr. Burnett described it to me as, a cancer cell in many situations is a cell that didn't grow up. When our cells divide, one thing that has to shut down is the mitochondria. Then the cells divide and splits, and then it has to turn back on and go become whatever it needs to become. If for some reason, let's say it's bad or it's dead, and it doesn't start back up, what's going to happen to that cell? It's going to kind of hang out. No, it goes back into a default mechanism because it will survive. And what does it survive as? A cancer cell. So you have all these different staging of cancer. So I put this in here to help start this process of us thinking about antioxidants and cell therapy and what it is and what really is cancer. It's complicated in many realms because it's one of our own cells that has the adaptability to many situations, which makes it difficult. And that's part of the problem. It's not an outside pathogen. It's not like an bacteria. It's not like a virus that invaded our cells, that invaded our body. It's foreign with our immune system. And we simply look at it and go, oh, that's a bad cell. We need to get rid of it. It was one of our own. What happened in that process that tissue, whether it's your prostate cancer, your breast cancer, your liver cancer, what is it that allowed it to stay there? And yet the rest of your body was fine. But you're telling me your immune system was just defunct in your liver and everywhere else it was okay? So what can we do about that? Various causes of cancer. We could talk about this for hours on top of this. But it is a process, believe it or not. And depending on some of the talks you may have heard here, guess what? I hate to break this to everybody, but we all have cancer right now. We all have abnormal cells. But our anti-cancer mechanisms are turned on for the majority of us. Those that are expressing that they actually have a marker for cancer have a higher ratio of these abnormal cells to the normal cells. Okay, what allowed that to happen? Well, and again, that's a whole longer talk that we could go into, but the process from initiation to progression could be in some cancers 20 years. In other cancers, they say it's less than that. But either way, we know it's quite a long period of time. And the one thing that we do know that affects it, obviously, is what this fancy term up here is called epigenetics. And some of you may have heard that. It's kind of coming out. It just pretty much says the environment that you live in. Again. And yet we have 7 billion people on this planet that are all in different types of environments. And when you compare those different societies over different courses of time, the one commonality that you have in the increase of disease is unfortunately what we have here in this country, and that's the Western lifestyle. They call it the standard American diet. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It stands for SAD, right? The SAD diet. But it's true. It really is true. And when you look at the things that are inside our foods, it's quite amazingly sad. And I kind of have a rule of thumb. If it lasts longer than 2 weeks, try and stay away from it, right? I mean, it's great. It makes it nice because, again, I go camping with my boys. I like to go backpacking and things like that. It's nice for food for that. But, it's tough to take a thing of spinach out in the mountains for 2 weeks. So in certain situations, I try and do what I can. But, it's too easy that you can drive right out of here down the street and you can pick up darn near everything you want within 15 or 20 minutes. But the stuff that you really should be eating is going to take you at least an hour to get it, prep it, and put it in your day. We all have busy schedules, and what do we do with that? So another thing, too, is inflammation. Again, we can talk on inflammation and NF-kappa B and all these different things and how those factors really factor into that. But again, that's where antioxidants really play the role because they keep this inflammation down. And it's no coincidence that the risk factor for cancer increases whenever you have inflammation. So if you have colitis, guess what? You're at a higher risk of colon cancer. If you have pancreatitis, you're at a higher risk of colon cancer. Why? Because this constant inflammation on the tissues and on the organs are doing what? Just inflamed, just irritating them, constantly irritating. An old definition for cancer used to be the wound that never would heal because it's constantly irritating. It can almost irritate itself. And without getting into too much of the lactic acid production and what cancer cells can do to survive, that's what it does, and it unfortunately does it very well. So here are some of the antioxidants in oncology, just as a quick touch base. A lot of times, for those of you that have either been diagnosed or have been through a situation in which you'll hear conventional oncology say that don't use antioxidants in your chemotherapy. Right. And you'll say, why? Well, it could, this is a little awkward, but it could mitigate the therapy. Okay, it could. It can do a lot of things too. Show me where. Show me the money as to where this actually happens. And in many situations, they can't show it to you. It doesn't exist. But yet, I can walk in and show them different trials of different areas of different things that have been used all across this country and the world that say contrary to that. That say, guess what? These things are actually supported. Why would you not use them? Or at least recommend them. Or if anything, just don't tell them not to do it. How about that? Let's just start there. Don't say you can recommend it. Stay out of that muddy water thing. How about you simply say, go eat healthy foods and take your supplements. Okay. Or not say anything at all and just say, that's all I know. You know, instead of acting as if they do know when they really don't. Okay, they don't know. I don't know a lot of things either, but I think the difference being is I'll tell you, I don't know. I'll try and go find out. I'll go find someone who's a little bit smarter than me who maybe have a better understanding. And in this case, this is from Dr. Keith Block, who's done this research. So, and go look at the evidence. And when I look at the evidence, I find that, well, I'm not on my slide there. As Hippocrates proclaimed a long time ago, that, you know, medicine be thy food and food be thy medicine. So something happened to my slide, I'm not going to turn it on. So he was right a few thousand years ago, right? And it is so true today. So a picture's worth 1,000 words. There it is. 4,000 different antioxidants right there. You don't even have to get a bottle of it off the store shelf. But you do have to prepare it. You do have to go look for it. You do have to spend your time and your energies to put this together in your meals. You're not going to find it in the package too often, and it's not going to last very long. And you're going to have to do it each and every day. And yes, it's going to be a pain in the butt, and I'm sorry. However, the longevity of your years will thank you for it. So, you know, and it's interesting because, you know, even in grains, you know, a lot of times the grains get the bad rap for, you know, stay off your grains, stay off your carbohydrates. Well, yes, but there's all kinds of different grains out there. So, utilize it. And when I try to teach my children, I say, here, guys, that's what you get to make something out of. I don't know what you have to make something out of it. You want to put it in a smoothie? You want to put it in with stir fry? You want to cook it on the bar? What do you want to do? I don't know. Let's get creative with it. And does it take work? Yeah, but it can be fun too. And when you do that, when you realize it, then when you make something fun, I found with kids, they tend to enjoy it a little bit more and will remember it. So here's a great example. I picked vitamin E specifically, so a lot of these slides in here I do pick specifically because vitamin E has gotten a bad rap to a certain degree. But vitamin E is it the alpha, the beta, the gamma, or the delta? So when you hear vitamin E, you know, which vitamin E are you getting? Again, here we go to this vitamin E. Well, vitamin E is not just one thing, and it's also a balance of how that is. And when you get it from these types of things, we're talking something totally different than when you get it out of the bottle. So a lot of the studies were done on antioxidants and vitamin E, and it actually showed in certain cancer patients, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have those slides in this deck, that vitamin E was actually bad for cancer patients. But again, it was a poorly done study.
They were also synthetic.
They were also synthetic, exactly.
They were synthetic.
So it was like, really? Yeah, and the dosing as well. So be careful of headlines all the way around, both good and bad. You really got to take the time and look at the question and say, okay, what vitamin E did you use? What was your dosing? Where was that? Etc. Let's make an educated assessment of what this is. Let's not simply jump on the bandwagon because I'm pro antioxidants or I'm anti-antioxidants. There's an oxymoron there. So here's some of my other favorites: resveratrol, fish oil, vitamin D, curcumin. Great stuff. Great, tons of literature out there. Wonderful things for the body. And these things do these things naturally. But the beauty about it is that curcumin wasn't designed in a lab to go kill cancer cells. But what it does is its mechanism of action. Okay? And without getting into too much science and cell processes and things, and then these things all work together. So, you know, one of you in here may be very good at playing basketball. Okay, great. But even if some of the rest of us aren't that good, we make the other person better because we're working as a team together. And that's where antioxidants and supplements and most of our food really plays a role, is because they work better as a team. So can you just single out curcumin as the one that's going to be quote-unquote your anti-cancer? No. Why? Because it works in so many different ways. And it works better with these things, because think of it as like handing chains off, and each one does a little bit of the work, and then it goes back and it recycles this, and it goes back and it does this, and it works in this part of the cell cycle. For any of you that have any cellular biology background, go look at the cell biology book, you'll see what I mean. Go look up pathways. Go look up these cycles and how these things work, and you'll go, okay, it'll make much more of an understanding. Yet, Conventional doctors are going to look at that and say, well, resveratrol can't do that. Well, by itself, yeah, kind of it doesn't. However, when you put it in the system, in the body, it does all kinds of wonderful things. And what do we have to do? We got to change the paradigm. That's one of my missions as to what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And it's changing. It's been slow. I wish it would have been a whole lot faster than what it is, but it's not. They're realizing it's this dysregulation of multiple genes. It's not just one thing. It's not going to be a single target. It's going to be an integrative approach. And many of the natural products and approaches do that by what they are. Resveratrol does that. Vitamin D does that. These things are wonderful, not just in very specific cases, but because they support our body and our systems across a big, broad spectrum. That's the key. You can target one cell, but that cell is simply part of the tissue. That tissue is then part of the organ. That organ is then part of the system, and that system is then part of the body. How can the ear go and talk to your hand and say, I'm any more important than this is? It can't, right? Does it do a different thing? It does. Is it made up of different things? Somewhat. So it's interesting that they still haven't, approached integrative medicine the way we would like to probably that same way. The body imbalance. And I mentioned that earlier in my talk or in the slide, and again, I come back to it. It's balance, balance, balance. It's not too much of one thing. It's not like, and how do we do that? And so here are some of the, I hit myself over the head to remind myself to keep things simple, Sanchez. This is what I come back to. And it sounds simple, and it's not to be flippant with, but it is. When you change your lifestyle, you will change your life. You can't not do it. It doesn't work any other way. Once you affect the input, the output is automatically affected by it. So metabolic therapies, and this is what I really key in on, because it's a major differentiation between cancer and normal cells, is metabolism. They've really focused on it. They've gotten away from the genomic idea of things. Your information is your information. It's not going to change. Take a piece of hair off every one of us and save it for 1,000 years, and guess what? Our genes are going to be our genes. But the expression of those genes come down to what? Energy. And this process here is really key. So this is inside that mitochondria, generating this energy. It's called the electron transport chain, and the process is called the Krebs cycle. And when you support this cycle, amazing things happen. Not only in cancer, but in degenerative disease in general. So we talk about a cancer cell. Okay, what can we do inside that cancer cell? Well, what's interesting is when we add certain types of ingredients that'll target this mitochondrial chain, what it does is it upregulates that mitochondria. And when we talk about oxidative therapies, we talk about upregulation. We always talk about hyperbaric chambers, ozone, these different things that increases oxygen supply into our bodies, okay? But the trick is doing it inside the cancer cell, because if you can drive that reaction, when you drive O2 production, what that actually generates is an oxygen radical. This goes back to my point. So this is a radical, but it's actually a necessary radical. So you don't want something quenching this radical. This is a necessary radical, because what does it do? It triggers a process which is known as apoptosis, or cell death. That's what this is the mechanism that cancer cells don't have, because they're mitochondrially deficient. The signal may come from DNA, however, it's this little bugger that has to be triggered. And if you can trigger it, then you can get that cell to turn on. But in a healthy cell, what do? Great. You want to upregulate oxygen in a healthy cell? What's the healthy cell say? Thank you. So now you can be beneficial to your normal cells, and you can be quote unquote anti-cancer to a cancer cell, or just a cell that hasn't grown up. So, integrative oncology philosophy. So this comes from a doctor I work with, Dr. Neil Forsyth, who is in the forefront of this, in my opinion, because this is what he does day in and day out. And this is a quote by him that cancer is becoming something that's managed. I'm looking for a day that will be saying, yeah, I have cancer, man. I'm living my life, I'm doing my things, and I'm going about my day. It isn't the death sentence necessarily. I would love to think that we're all going to live forever, but we're not. So we're going to die of something. And cancer has always been a part, abnormal cells have been a part of that. But at the rate they've been at, as I showed you in that earlier slide, it's disproportionate. And more importantly than whether or not we can, when you stop cancer, that's a huge win. So for those that are dealing with cancer, and you can stop cancer's growth, that's awesome. What's actually more important that people hardly ever want to talk about is the side effects of the chemotherapy and radiation. And this is where these antioxidants really play a big role. This is where diet, detox, lifestyle are huge, and I can't tell you enough to do those types of things, because the side effects of this, they'll tell you their side effects, but they won't necessarily go into the details of it. And if there's one thing that has been shown day in and day out, is that when you do integrative oncology, integrative therapies in general, these things are mitigated tremendously. But they don't measure these things. Because what do cancers go by? 5-year survival. When we get tired of that. Oh, am I done? Okay. So, I guess I'm done here. Like I said, I tried to get it into 30 minutes. I knew it would be really tough. So, here's a few of the things of the studies that integrative oncology. So, Dr. Forsythe does this. He's now up. These are 3 different outcome studies that he's done. And what does he use? Things like glutathione, lipoic acid, vitamin C. These various things that other doctors are using across the country as well. This is just one that I'm learning. And again, it's going to be a combination by putting together pieces of the puzzle that don't just include one single approach, but a conglomeration of approaches when it comes to integrated cancer care. And again, my friend Hippocrates said, and if one thing I'll stress, don't treat the disease, treat the person. Right? If I can tell these doctors to look at people for who they are. They may be a person with cancer, but they're still a person. And the second they start looking at people that way, I hope that paradigm will shift naturally. So these are where you can find some more information. You can come in by the booth there. And again, I have the slide presentation. I know a lot of people are taking pictures of these things, so I'm happy to give you my PDF file of this, and I'm more than happy to go through it if you'd like to reach me. And a lot of people ask why I do what I do. There it is. So, you live with your what, and you live for your why. So, I got my nieces and nephews and my 2 sons in it, and there's my wife. So, thank you for your time. Do we have time for questions? So I'm free to talk with some questions if there's any, and if not, you can reach me at the meeting.
So even if you don't have cancer, if you have an autoimmune deficiency and issues like that, how you be able to make situation?
Yeah, so the question was, is autoimmune systems. Autoimmune, when you look at the dysfunction of autoimmune, the answer is yes. So this is where, again, dosing in different ways, because autoimmune patients obviously require a different than necessarily cancer. But when you look at the basic dysfunction of them, they're all really simple. Parkinson's, MS, endometriosis, Alzheimer's, they are just dysfunction in your nerve cells versus your immune system cells versus just a specific tissue cell like a prostate cancer or a prostate cell. But yes, the answer is yes.
WW Kelly